So Civilization 6 came out recently, and I was pleased to find that it doesn't actually suffer from any of the issues I was worried about in my previous video. For $60, it provides a nice chunk of content, and while we'll be getting DLC later on, its vanilla release is a good amount of content right out the door. It's got a lot of new great features that really enhance how you play the Civilization game. The district system is a welcome addition that makes city placement on the map far more important. It adds a layer of complexity to how you develop your civilization. And it makes cities feel more proper than they did in Civ 5, in which all buildings were supposedly occupying a single spot on the map. Additionally, the civic tree works as a great parallel to the tech tree and presents boundless opportunities for small bonuses to work toward whichever victory type you're aiming for. It's also cool how they enhance the happiness, or amenities as it's known now, system, in which happiness is tracked per city instead of across the whole civilization, which further incentivizes expansion. Also, despite a lot of people really disliking the new art style, I think it looks pretty nice. Sure, it's a little cartoony, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's interestingly stylized, and I think that's cool. However, on the flip side, it's not without its issues. My smallest nitpick is that it has a high barrier to entry. Now, this is natural for a strategy game, especially one that lasts as long as Civilization, but it just made it feel a little bit harder for me to get the ropes than it would have had there been, say, a tutorial catered directly for people familiar with previous installments of the game. Also, I don't really like how the tech tree is like elongated. Some might prefer this as it feels a little less bunched together than it did in Civ 5, but I liked having it bunched up because it was easier to see where everything was at a glance. However, my biggest issue, the beef, is how Civ 6 handles visibility states. So in Civilization, there are three types of visibility states: an active state, which represents the area surrounding the player's cities or units; a seen state, representing the area the player has seen but is not actively in; and an undiscovered state, representing area the player has yet to travel to. So in Civ 5, the undiscovered state used a typical fog of war. Any place that you hadn't seen was covered in fog. The active state showed the land around you, in which trees, mountains, or any other terrain is easily identifiable. And the seen state still showed the land just like the active state, but it was darkened. You could still see terrain or other Civ cities, but not their units. In Civ 6, the undiscovered state imitates a map. It looks like a tan parchment paper. The active state is the same as in Civ 5, in which you can see the immediate terrain surrounding you. However, my issue is with the seen state. Instead of being a darkened version of the active state like in Civ 5, seen land looks like the map parchment, only the land or terrain is drawn in, almost as if it's like a drawn map from long ago. Now, I can't stress enough that visually, I think this looks really cool. It's actually really beautiful having this homage to old drawn maps, and it's really stunning to look at. But when it comes to the context of the game, I found this a little bothersome. You can still see trees and mountains and any other terrain on this land, but it's not as immediately identifiable. As a player, you need to spend more time looking at this territory in order to discern what's actually there. It seems like a small nitpick, but it also had a drastic effect on how I perceived my progression through the game. Here I am well into a game of Civ, and when I quickly glance at the map, I feel like I haven't discovered much. Yes, I have seen a lot of land, but it doesn't feel as immediately satisfying to explore because it feels almost like for every new land I find, a bit of land is unseen, if that makes any sense. It blends in too much with the undiscovered map parchment, and it makes the world feel a lot smaller in my opinion. It doesn't affect the game's mechanics in any meaningful way, but it had a harsh effect on how I felt about expanding my view of the world in the game, and that's a big deal to me. Civilization is a very slow-paced game, but it's never felt slow. It always manages to keep giving the player more as they go on, and after a few hours, it's satisfying to take a moment to look at the world and think, wow, I remember when I started this game with just 2 units. But with the new scene state, it just feels especially slow, and I feel like my perspective of the world is as stunted as this. It's less gratifying, and it feels like I've made such little progress after a few hours. Even though I have made a lot of progress, it just feels like a little. Ultimately, this made me pretty salty. I know this is just a nitpick, and it's not a big deal, but it was kind of a big deal to me. It's not a bad game, but this issue just took me really far out of it. Far more than it should have at the very least. Joe, can we expect the beef?
Yeah, sure thing.
Alright.
Alright, let's see. It's looking good. Got a nice char to it. Thermometer's taking a while. You know, I'd say it's medium rare, maybe a little rare. You know, we could cook it for longer. Add a little DLC to it.
All right. And that's my beef with Civ 6.
Salty. Yeah.